My ex and I, 44 female, divorced when our daughters, Stacy, 17 female, and Emily, 14 female, were young. About a year after the divorce, he passed away. My ex was paying child support, but that stopped the day he died. The girls inherited their father's estate, but since he was fresh into his career, it wasn't much. Things could have been rough as a single mother, but his brother stepped into his shoes. They took the girls on the weekends and basically bought the girls anything they needed from clothing to school supplies, and bought our groceries. They also indulged the girls' every whim. Stacy loved horses when she was little, so Uncle John paid for her lessons and riding fees. Emily thought she wanted to play the piano, so Uncle Jeff paid for her lessons and bought her a piano. When the girls grew out of those phases and got interested in something else, their uncles were there ready to indulge them. I tried talking to the uncles about not spoiling my girls, but they said that their nieces needed to explore their own interests, and those explorations will help their brain developments. I disagree, but was not in a financial situation to push too hard, because they were paying so much for the girls. I was basically responsible for only the rent. I later remarried a wonderful man, who brought 2 kids into the family. We had 1 more kid together, and things are good for the most part. However, kids are smart, so my daughter's step and half-siblings started to notice their sisters having more experiences and things than they do. My husband didn't like the situation, and we had some arguments about it over the years. Things came to a boiling point recently when we were discussing how to pay for our 2 oldest kids' colleges. Stacy and her stepbrother Rick, 18 male. Both are good students, and while they haven't gotten their acceptance letters, I have no doubt they'll get into good schools. My husband and I make enough money to live a middle-class lifestyle with 5 kids, but not enough to put them through college. The reality is that they'll have to take out school loans. We talked to both of them about loans, and this is when I found out Stacy had already talked to her uncles, and they're paying for her tuition and costs of living wherever she wants to go. This floored us, and made my husband extremely mad. He got red and started to scream how it's not fair Stacy and Emily will get to go to expensive colleges and graduate with no loans, while our other kids will have to go to state schools and take out loans. He wanted me to call John and Jeff and tell them to stop spoiling the girls. On one hand, I agree 100% with my husband that it's not fair to my other kids. But on the other hand, I can't hold my daughters back from something so wonderful. In the end, I told my husband I'm not going to tell my ex-brother-in-laws to stop spoiling our daughters. Was I wrong to tell him that? Update. Thank you all for reading my post and answering my question. Things have gone downhill, and I'm now crushed. I was at work, and without my knowledge, my husband called John and yelled at him to mind his own business, told him we don't want their money, and to stay out of our lives. My husband then went and yelled at the girls as they packed their bags and as they were leaving for their uncles. When I got home, my husband wanted to call the police to report them as runaways, but I talked him out of it. I went over to John's house and his wife led me to the kitchen, where we stood in silence watching John holding my girls while they cried. For a minute, I pictured their father holding them. Stacy and Emily refused to talk to me when they walked past me on their way upstairs to their room. John and I had a long conversation about the whole situation. He basically told me he's doing what his brother couldn't, and both me and my husband can go to hell if we don't like it. He said the girls should stay with him and his family until things calm down, and I agreed. So this is where we are for now. Also, to answer some common questions. 1. My husband makes less money than I do, so he's been unable to save up college tuition. 2. His ex is still in the picture and has visitation rights. She makes less money than him, so has nothing saved up, much less tuition. Not the a-hole. Your daughters shouldn't miss out from their paternal relatives just because your husband and the other children might be super jealous. Those other kids have something your oldest girls don't. Their dad. You'd be a gigantic a-hole if you were anything besides grateful for the generosity of your former husband's brothers towards your oldest children. Edit. Regarding the update, that is so horrible, OP. You might want to reconsider being married to such a selfish man. He doesn't sound wonderful like your original post portrayed him prior to the update. I hope you and your oldest daughters are in a good place already, or very soon. Keep on supporting their dreams. Your daughters will never ever forgive you if you sabotage their chance to graduate without debt, nor should they. That would be an incredibly cruel and spiteful thing to do to your children. And ironically, your husband's bitterness is making him short-sighted about the other kids' well-being. Having your girls' uncles assume the financial burden for their living expenses will free you up to help the other kids where you can. Finally, is it normal for your husband to get red and scream about financial stress or the realities of a blended family? The substance of his demands, that you sabotage your kids' opportunities, is unacceptable itself, but the way he's expressing himself is also creating an atmosphere of fear and distrust. Personally, I wouldn't consider him a wonderful man until he agrees to therapy to figure out how to cope with his frustrations without harming his family. Not the a-hole. Your husband literally got mad about a generous gift that doesn't involve him, and it actually financially benefits everyone, whether he's ready to admit it or not. Having two of the kids paid for will benefit even your stepsons because you will have more of an ability to help, co-sign for a loan when it's just one, not two, etc. He literally wants that help refused, to the absolute detriment of your daughters and the family, in terms of financial and relationships. If his kids suddenly come into some inheritance from the mother side of the family, ask him what he forced them to share it with your girls. Everyone knows the answer here. My wife, female 30, and I, male 30, have separated finances and a shared account for house expenses. This was her idea. Her sister, female 20, is in college, private one. Her parents and my wife pay for it and her expenses. She doesn't have the best grades and almost failed all her classes last semester. Before it is mentioned, she doesn't have any mental problems. She sees a therapist, but said therapist said to her that there's no excuse for her not to try harder. She's smart enough, but only does the bare minimum. She's more interested in putting her energy into other things, mostly friends. Her dad is tired of it and is not going to give his share for the next semester, but is willing to pay for a public school or tutors. My wife wants me to contribute so she can stay in that school. I didn't accept, stating the same reasons as her father. She didn't like it because if she put in the rest, it would put a dent in her account. Although there is some truth to that, it was her decision and hers alone to help pay for her sister's college. I didn't agree with it, but there's a reason why we have separate accounts. She mentioned that I help pay for my nephew's and niece's education. I do, but I do it with conditions they always fulfilled. I said fine, I will pay the rest, but she will have the same conditions. If she doesn't fulfill them by the end of the next semester, I want my money back. I have to mention that this conversation happened with her family present, which I think is BS. Her mother, sister, and her didn't like it. Even less when her brother, male 15, jokingly asked me if he can get money. I said that if he meets the conditions, he does, he will get it. She's been short with me and said that I shouldn't put conditions if I'm helping. I'm not helping. I'm willing to contribute, but not for free. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Why should you foot the bill for your sister-in-law to go to an expensive school to socialize? She can either accept your help under your terms, or she can turn your offer down. Not the a-hole. It's her education. She has to want it, and if people keep paying for it, she has no incentive to get it done, ever. She can take out loans at her expense and also require her to stay in school for deferment, or get your money for free for, shocker, staying in school. They should be thanking you for stepping up. If they don't want to put up, then they need to shut up. Not the a-hole. It's your money and your conditions. You mentioned the conditions are the same for your nieces and nephews, so it's not unreasonable to have the same conditions if you were to help her sister. Your wife, her sister, and mom are being unreasonable. My parents live with my younger brother, 33 years old. My dad is still working with some mortgage to pay off. My younger brother is sort of the unspoken taboo in the family. My younger brother has a degree and master's from an Ivy League university, which he got on a scholarship. Worked in consulting for a few months before suddenly quitting, talking about things being too stressful, not wanting to be part of the rat race, etc. That's okay. We were supportive and tried to encourage him, until it turns out he really didn't plan on working anymore. He would pick up an odd job, some entry-level stuff or part-time gig, every now and then, and quit soon after, saying it's not for him, too stressful, etc. He has no criminal convictions, no mental illness that we know of. The reason why he's able to have such a lifestyle is that at the end of the day, he still lives with or off my parents. He eats all 3 meals at home, almost doesn't go out, doesn't have a social life. You can imagine how little he spends. It's to the point where he wanted to tag along when I brought my parents for their medical checkup, not because he cared. He was playing mobile games throughout, but because he needed a free lunch. We've gone from supportive to shaming to just flat out ignoring him. My mother will offer him meals if she's cooking for the family, but nothing beyond that. I've also made it clear he's no longer welcome when I bring my parents out for meals. So now, I've bought a bigger house for my family, and we're planning to do extensive renovations to it. Wife and I have decided to invite my parents to stay with us. This allows for more care, given their increasing mobility issues, and also to allow them to sell their house and retire. The elephant in the room is my brother, of course. My dad and I are in agreement that my brother is on his own now, but my mother is hesitant. My brother's first reaction upon hearing the news was to assume that he's moving in with me. That all changed once he found out, and he accused me of trying to punish him for his lifestyle choices, stating that he was happy and comfortable, and I had to ruin it all for him. I told him that the renovations would be done earliest end of next year, so that was enough time for him to get his crap together. I thought all was done and settled until my mother presumably started getting cold feet and thought about keeping the house to my brother self-sufficient. She also asked me to consider letting my brother move in and use my contacts network to get him a job, all of which I declined. When he left his first job, I was able to ask some friends at another bank to set up an interview for him, but he ghosted that. I'm no longer willing to help or do anything that will put my reputation at risk. My mother has now changed her tone and is accusing me of being extremely cruel to my brother. Am I the a-hole for not lifting a finger to help him? Not the a-hole. He's never going to grow up unless he's forced to. What will he do when your parents are no longer around? The human parasite must move on to another host, not the a-hole. Your mother sounds lonely, but is enabling him. The best thing for him would be to force him to be a responsible adult and look after himself. Enabling him is not actually helping him in the long run. Not the a-hole. You will inherit this problem 100% if you let him spend one night in your house. I feel for your parents, since this is such a crappy position to be in. Everyone can easily say some tough love would sort him out quickly. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in reality with some people like this who will spend more effort avoiding work than actually working. I would also make sure you've done some estate will planning with your parents, since you are becoming their prime caregivers and should be supported in doing, in my opinion. I, female 29, and my husband, male 32, are currently saving for our first house. We have 3 kids, female 5, male 3, male 1, and I want at least a 3 bedroom, 1 for us, 2 to share amongst the 3 kids, and 2 bathroom. My husband recently informed me that my mother-in-law is considering divorcing my father-in-law. My husband wants to change our house plan to include my mother-in-law moving in with us. We talked about what that would mean, and ultimately, I decided I really don't want to do that, and it's caused a problem in our marriage. The reason why I decided against it is mainly because my mother-in-law would be taking full custody of their 10-year-old daughter, husband's half-sister, and we would also have to take mother-in-law's mom, husband's grandmother. Mother-in-law is fine, but her daughter causes so much trouble and chaos. Many of husband's aunts and cousins never visit anymore and told me it's because of the problems this girl causes with the other kids in the family her age. And I don't like her being around my children as well. Grandmother-in-law is also elderly and needs full-time care, which I can't provide since I work and have 3 kids to take care of. I told my husband if this is what he wants, he can contribute more towards our savings, and we can get a property with a back house for mother-in-law, her daughter, and grandmother-in-law. Husband doesn't want to contribute more money, and instead suggested we keep to our original plan, but keep 1 room for us and the kids, 1 room for grandmother-in-law, and 1 room for mother-in-law and her daughter. I said absolutely not, because the whole purpose of getting our own home was to have our own room and our kids have their own room. We went back and forth, but my suggestions don't work for him, and his suggestions don't work for me. In the end, I suggested mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law move in with someone else, and my husband is upset that I suggested this. Mother-in-law's sister has a huge 5-bedroom home in a nice area 10 minutes away and only lives with her husband and adult son. My husband also has a younger brother, mother-in-law's favorite child, who currently has a big 3-bedroom home with 2 living rooms and only lives with his wife and 1 daughter, female 5. Brother-in-law also has more money saved than we do and wants to upgrade to an even bigger home. I think these are both better options for mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law than my husband and I can possibly provide. But my husband hasn't been speaking to me lately because of this. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to compromise our plans for our first home in order to accommodate family? Side note, mother-in-law has never had a job and doesn't plan on getting one, so we wouldn't be charging rent for anyone and would also have to pay for everyone's living expenses. Living situation would also be permanent, since mother-in-law doesn't make money and therefore can't eventually move out. Husband and I also make the least amount of money in the family at a combined income of 50 to 60K per year. 4 adults, 4 kids, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 50 to 60K total income. That math is not matching. This is a recipe for disaster. Just conflict and not enough of anything to go around written all over it. I think your suggestions are sensible. Piling 8 people into a 3-bedroom and providing for them on your 2 combined earnings is not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It is not your job to take care of your husband's family, especially when you have your own. Your family should have and get priority over anything. He can pay for a separate place for them if he has so much extra money. If not, he can pay for a separate place for himself to live with them, but himself. You and your kids need room to grow. Nothing good will come of this if you allow them to live with you. Do not give in on this. Not the a-hole. This is the hill that marriages die on. You can't afford to house 3 more people, and with 2 other siblings who can, your husband is being stubbornly foolish. While I think mother-in-law might get child support and alimony, which she can use to pay rent, expenses, it's still too much of an ask, especially when you need space for your family. Added that grandmother-in-law needs care and that sister-in-law has behavioral issues. Well, your family comes first, and your husband needs to respect your decision.